Just sit at the bar, okay? It'll look less awkward. Those were the first words my daughter said to me that night. Not hello. Not, I'm glad you came. Just that. I was standing in the entryway of Belmont Row, a members-only art gallery and dining salon in downtown Boston, still holding my coat, still catching my breath from walking 3 blocks in sensible shoes I already regretted wearing. I remember the smell first. Polished wood, truffle oil, money. My name is Eleanor Whitman. I am 62 years old. And in that moment, with my daughter's eyes refusing to meet mine, I knew something was very wrong. Sit at the bar? I repeated softly, making sure I'd heard her correctly. Claire exhaled through her nose, the way she always did when she thought I was being difficult. She looked stunning, of course. Sleek black dress, hair pulled back too tightly. Diamond studs her husband bought her after his last promotion. Mom, she said under her breath, this is a work dinner. Victor's partners are here. The table is full. I glanced past her shoulder. The table was not full. There was an empty chair right beside her, and it had my name written all over it. I thought you invited me, I said, keeping my voice level. You said it was important. She shifted her weight. A familiar gesture. Defensive. Impatient. I did invite you to see the place, to understand our world a little better. She lowered her voice, but sitting at the main table might send the wrong message. Wrong message. Those words lodged somewhere deep in my chest. Behind her, Victor finally turned around. My son-in-law, 41 years old, corporate lawyer, the kind of man who smiled with his mouth, but never with his eyes. Oh, he said, as if he'd just noticed me. Eleanor, you made it. No hug, no kiss on the cheek, just an assessment. Good evening, Victor, I said. He gave a quick nod, already scanning the room, making sure no one important was watching this interaction too closely. That's when it hit me. I wasn't here as a guest. I was a liability. Mom, Claire said again, more sharply now. Please, don't make this a thing. Don't make this a thing. I felt heat crawl up my neck, but I smiled. I'd been practicing that smile for years. The one that swallowed humiliation whole. Of course, I said. The bar is fine. I walked away before either of them could say anything else. The bartender, a young woman with kind eyes, pulled out a stool for me. Can I get you something? She asked. Just water, please. As she turned away, I caught my reflection in the mirror behind the bar. Gray hair I refused to dye, a navy dress I'd bought on sale, pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother. I looked ordinary. Behind me, laughter erupted at the table. Victor's booming voice, Claire's practiced giggle, the clink of crystal glasses. I sat there for nearly 20 minutes. No one checked on me. No one waved. No one even glanced in my direction. That was when Victor's voice carried across the room, louder than he probably intended. She doesn't really fit the brand, he said, chuckling. But she insists on being included. Someone laughed. Someone else said, family, right? And my daughter said nothing at all. I took a slow sip of water, my hand trembling just slightly. They had no idea who I really was. And tonight, for the first time in years, I decided I was done protecting them from that truth. 3 hours earlier, I had almost said no. Claire's call came while I was folding laundry in my apartment, the hum of the old dryer filling the room. Mom, she said, overly cheerful, Victor wants to take you out tonight, somewhere special. That should have been my first warning. Victor never wanted to take me anywhere. Why? I asked. A pause. Just a fraction too long. He's being considered for partner. The firm is hosting a private dinner. He thought it would be nice. Nice. I wiped my hands on a towel. You've never invited me to his work events before. Well, she said quickly, things are different now. We're at a different stage. Different stage. I should have heard what she wasn't saying. Still, I said yes. Because hope is a stubborn thing, especially in mothers. I spent more time getting ready than I wanted to admit. Tried on 3 dresses, put on lipstick, took it off, put it back on. I told myself I was overthinking. By the time I arrived at Belmont Row, my stomach was already tight. Now, sitting alone at the bar, that tightness turned into something heavier, sharper. I watched Claire lean toward Victor, her hand on his arm, nodding as one of his colleagues spoke animatedly about acquisitions and mergers. She looked like she belonged there. I looked like an afterthought. That's when the gallery director approached me. He was in his late 50s, silver-haired, impeccably dressed. I recognized him instantly, though he clearly did not expect to see me sitting at the bar. "Miss Whitman?" he said carefully. I turned. "Yes." His eyebrows lifted almost imperceptibly. I wasn't sure I was either, I replied. He hesitated. "Would you prefer the private room?" I smiled. A real smile this time. "Not yet." He nodded slowly, understanding more than I'd said aloud. "Please let me know if you need anything." As he walked away, I felt it again. That familiar duality, invisible to my family, perfectly visible to everyone else. I glanced back at the table just in time to see Victor gesture toward me with his wine glass. "She's very simple," he said, "but harmless." Harmless. The word echoed. I stood up. Not abruptly, not dramatically, just decisively. I walked toward the table, my heels suddenly louder than I remembered. Claire looked up first. Her smile froze. "Mom?" she whispered. "What are you doing?" I placed my hand on the empty chair. "This seat," I said calmly. "Is it taken?" Victor laughed. A short, dismissive sound. "Eleanor," he said, "this really isn't appropriate." "Isn't it?" I asked. The table fell quiet. I could feel eyes on us now. Curious. Alert. "I was invited," I continued. "Unless that invitation came with conditions I wasn't told about." Claire's face flushed. "Please," she hissed. "You're embarrassing us." Embarrassing. I looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. "When did I start embarrassing you?" I asked quietly. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Victor stepped in. "Let's be honest," he said smoothly. "This environment can be intimidating. We didn't want you to feel out of place." Out of place. I nodded slowly. "I see." And for the first time that night, I felt something shift. Not anger. Clarity. "You know," I said, loud enough for the table to hear, "I've spent the better part of my life making myself smaller so other people could feel more comfortable." Victor's smile tightened. "And I think," I continued, "that ends tonight." There was a murmur from a nearby table. Claire grabbed my wrist. "Mom, stop." I gently removed her hand. "No," I said. "You've had your turn." I looked at Victor. "And since we're being honest," I added, "you might want to rethink how you speak about me, especially in a building I own." Silence. Pure. Absolute. Silence. Victor's laugh died in his throat. "What did you say?" he asked. I met his eyes. I repeated calmly, "You might want to be careful, because Belmont Row belongs to me." Claire stared at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. "That's not funny," she whispered. "I'm not joking." Behind me, I felt the presence of the gallery director again. Closer this time. "Ms. Whitman," he said respectfully, "shall I prepare the room?" Victor's face drained of color. Claire's mouth fell open. And in that moment, as decades of quiet sacrifice finally caught up with them, I realized something profound. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was the beginning of a reckoning. If you want to know what happened next, what secrets finally came to light, and how a lifetime of betrayal led to consequences no one saw coming, stay with me. And when you're ready, listen to your own story too. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't cruelty, it's truth. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps these stories reach the women who need them most. For a moment, no one moved. Not Claire, not Victor, not the men and women seated around the table, who suddenly looked like they'd wandered into a courtroom instead of an elite dinner. I stayed standing, my hand still resting on the back of the empty chair, feeling the weight of years settle into my spine. The gallery director cleared his throat softly, an almost imperceptible gesture of deference. "Miss Whitman," he said again, a little louder now. "Would you like me to ask the staff to prepare the West Salon?" Victor finally found his voice. This is absurd," he said, though it came out thin, strained. "Eleanor, if this is some kind of joke, it's inappropriate." I turned to him slowly. "Do I look like I'm joking, Victor?" He didn't answer. Claire was staring at me as if she were seeing a stranger, wearing her mother's face. "You own this place?" she whispered. "That's not possible." I smiled, not unkindly, but without softness. "You've never asked me what I do with my time," I said. You only ever told me what not to do with yours. One of Victor's colleagues shifted uncomfortably. Another checked his phone. The energy around the table had changed. The air felt tighter, sharper. This is extremely unprofessional, Victor snapped, standing abruptly. We're in the middle of a firm event. And yet, I replied evenly, I've been sitting alone at your invitation while you explained to strangers why I didn't belong. Claire reached for my arm again. Mom, please, let's talk about this later. Later, I repeated. Later is how we got here. I finally pulled out the chair and sat down. No one stopped me. Victor remained standing, his jaw clenched. I don't understand, Claire said, her voice breaking slightly. You live in a one-bedroom apartment. You shop at discount stores. You take the bus. Yes, I said, because I choose to. I folded my hands on the table. After your father died, I continued, I learned very quickly that money changes how people see you, including the people you love. Victor scoffed. So this is some kind of test? I met his gaze. No, I said. This is a consequence. The gallery director stepped closer to Victor. Sir, Miss Whitman is indeed the sole owner of Belmont Row, including the gallery, the dining salon, and the adjoining properties. She acquired the building 12 years ago. 12 years. Claire's knees buckled slightly. She sat down hard in her chair. 12 years? She whispered. You've owned this place longer than I've been married. I nodded. And you've sat at this table, I added, looking at Victor, drinking wine you didn't pay for, in a building you didn't know belonged to the woman you dismissed. A low murmur rippled through the room. Victor's face flushed, then paled. Why didn't you tell us? Claire asked. Why would you hide something like that? I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt the ache behind my ribs. Because I wanted to know who you were when you thought I had nothing, I said softly. And now I do. Victor laughed again, but there was no humor in it. So what, Eleanor? You're going to throw us out? Make a spectacle? I tilted my head. You've already done that. The gallery director spoke again. Ms. Whitman, several guests have expressed discomfort. I understand, I said. So have I. I turned back to Claire. You invited me here, I said. Tell me why. Her lips trembled. Victor thought. She began, then stopped. He thought it would be good for you to see what our life is like. And what did you think? I asked. She swallowed. I thought you might finally understand why we keep some distance. Distance. I nodded slowly. And now, I said, you will understand mine. I stood. Dinner is over, I said calmly. For you. Victor stared at me. You can't do that. I can, I replied. And I am. The gallery director gestured discreetly toward the exit. Claire looked up at me, panic in her eyes. Mom, she whispered. Please don't do this. I paused. This, I said quietly, is only the beginning. They left in silence. No shouting, no dramatic exit. Just the soft scrape of chairs, the murmur of shocked conversation following them like a shadow. I stayed behind. I always did. The gallery emptied slowly, staff moving with careful respect, eyes lingering on me with a mix of curiosity and sympathy. When the room was finally quiet, I sat alone at the table, staring at the place where Claire had been sitting moments before. My phone buzzed. Claire. I didn't answer. Instead, I closed my eyes and let myself remember. Years ago, after her father's funeral, Claire had slept curled against my side, whispering that she was afraid the world would swallow us whole. I promised her it wouldn't. I promised her I would protect her. I had, just not from herself. The next morning, my lawyer called. Eleanor, he said gently. I heard about last night. It traveled fast, I replied. Do you want to talk about your estate? I exhaled slowly. Yes, I said. It's time. We met that afternoon. I told him everything, not just about last night, but about the slow erosion of respect, the missed holidays, the carefully worded excuses, the way my presence had become inconvenient. Your will currently leaves everything to Claire, he said carefully. I know, I replied. That will change. He nodded, unsurprised. What do you want to do? I thought of Victor's voice. She doesn't fit the brand. I want conditions, I said. That evening, Claire showed up at my apartment. She looked smaller without her tailored dress, younger, scared. I didn't know, she said immediately. I swear I didn't know. I believe you, I replied. But that doesn't excuse what you did know. She sat across from me, hands clenched. He's under a lot of pressure, she said weakly. Victor. His firm expects a certain image. And so I asked, you adjusted mine? She started to cry. I never meant to hurt you. I know, I said softly. But you did. There was a long silence. What happens now? She asked. I looked at her. My daughter. My only child. Now, I said, you learn. She frowned. Learn what? What it's like, I replied, to earn respect without borrowing it. Her phone buzzed. Victor again. She ignored it. For the first time in a long while, that gave me hope. But hope is fragile, and I wasn't done yet. Because what Claire didn't know, what Victor certainly didn't know, was that the firm he worked for was about to receive a letter. And once they did, the distance they'd created between us would feel very small compared to what was coming next. If this story feels familiar, if it echoes something in your own life, stay with me. The truth always demands its reckoning. And sometimes, the hardest lessons come wrapped in silence. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to hear what happens next. The letter was already written. It sat in a cream-colored envelope on my dining table, addressed in neat, deliberate handwriting. Whitmore, Klein and Associates, Victor's firm. I had drafted it the night before, then rewritten it twice. Not because I doubted the truth of what I was saying, but because truth, when delivered correctly, can be far more devastating than anger. I did not accuse, I did not insult. I simply described. I described the behavior I had witnessed, the language used toward an elderly parent, the public humiliation, the values on display in a professional setting. I did not request punishment. I requested reflection, and I signed my name. Eleanor Whitman, Managing Trustee, Whitman Cultural Holdings. By the time the courier picked it up, my hands were steady. Claire called again that afternoon. I let it ring. Then again. Then a third time. Finally, I answered. Mom, she said breathless. Victor says you contacted his firm. I did, I replied. Her voice cracked. Why would you do that? I leaned back in my chair and stared out the window at the city I had built my quiet empire in. Because, I said, your husband confused cruelty with confidence, and someone needed to correct that. This could destroy him, she whispered. I closed my eyes. No, I said calmly. What will destroy him is the belief that there are no consequences. She was silent. I raised you to be kind, I continued. Somewhere along the way, you learned to be careful instead. Careful not to offend. Careful not to stand out. Careful not to be seen with someone who didn't match your image. That's not fair, she said weakly. It's accurate, I replied. That night, Victor came to my apartment. He didn't knock. He pounded. When I opened the door, he stood there disheveled, tie loose, eyes wild. You had no right, he snapped, pushing past me. No right to interfere with my career. I closed the door calmly. You interfered with our relationship long before I interfered with your job, I said. He turned on me. You humiliated me. I laughed softly. Not out of humor, out of disbelief. You humiliated yourself, I said. I simply stopped protecting you. He paced my small living room, taking in the modest furniture, the framed photos on the wall. All this, he sneered. It's an act, isn't it? No, I replied. It's a choice. Claire hovered near the doorway, watching him unravel. They're calling an internal review, Victor said, his voice shaking now. They want statements, witnesses. Good, I said. You're enjoying this, he accused. I met his gaze. No, I said quietly. I'm finished with it. He froze. What do you mean? I said, that your worth to me no longer depends on your success. And my silence no longer depends on your comfort. For the first time, he looked afraid. The review moved faster than anyone expected. By Friday, Victor was placed on administrative leave. By Monday, the firm issued a carefully worded statement about values and conduct. By Wednesday, his nameplate was gone from his office door. Claire didn't tell me at first. I heard it from someone else. One of the gallery patrons stopped me after an exhibit opening. Rough week for your son-in-law, she said gently. I nodded. He'll survive. That evening, Claire came over again. She looked exhausted. Older. They let him go, she said. I poured her tea and waited. He says it's your fault. I handed her the cup. And what do you think? She stared into the steam for a long moment. I think, she said slowly, that I let him believe things I never should have. I said nothing. He never spoke to you that way when we were alone, she continued. But I heard it. I laughed it off. I told myself he was stressed. Her shoulders slumped. I was complicit. The word hung between us. Yes, I said. You were. She flinched, then nodded. I don't want to be that person anymore, she whispered. I reached across the table and took her hand. The first time I'd touched her since Belmont Row. Then don't be, I said. Victor, however, did not learn so quickly. A week later, he demanded a meeting. All three of us. Neutral ground. We met at a small cafe near the river. Nothing exclusive, nothing curated. He arrived late. They ruined me, he said, without preamble. Do you understand that? I stirred my coffee. No, I replied, but I understand consequences. He leaned forward. You could fix this. A call, a donation. You have influence. I looked at him for a long moment. Victor, I said, the fact that you think this can be fixed with money tells me everything. Claire spoke up then, her voice firmer than I'd heard in years. We're not asking her to fix anything. He stared at her. Claire. No, she said. I'm done letting you decide who belongs in my life. Silence fell. Victor laughed bitterly. So that's it? You're choosing her? Claire didn't hesitate. I'm choosing myself, she said. Something in his face cracked. And in that moment, I realized the revenge wasn't the letter, or the job, or the exposure. It was watching the illusion he built finally collapse under the weight of truth. And the story was far from over, because the next choice would not be mine. It would be Claire's. And that choice would change everything. Claire moved out 3 weeks later. She didn't announce it. She didn't dramatize it. She simply showed up at my apartment one Sunday morning with 2 suitcases and a look on her face I hadn't seen since she was a teenager who'd finally told the truth. I need somewhere to stay, she said. Just for a while. I stepped aside without a word. That first night, we sat across from each other at my small kitchen table. The same table where she'd done homework, where I'd paid bills late into the night, where I'd learned how to stretch silence into survival. I don't know who I am without him, she admitted, fingers wrapped tightly around her mug. Everything I've done for the last 15 years was calibrated. To what? I asked, gently. To not rocking the boat, she said. To not embarrassing him. To not reminding people where I came from. I watched her carefully. And where did you come from? I asked. Her eyes filled. From you. That was the first crack. The days that followed were strange and quiet. Claire slept late. She walked everywhere. She cooked meals that didn't photograph well. She listened more than she spoke. Victor, on the other hand, unraveled loudly. The messages started at night. Long, rambling, accusatory. You turned her against me. You poisoned her. You always hated me. I never replied. Then came the voicemail that changed everything. You think you've won, Victor slurred, but you're not as clean as you think. I know things, Eleanor. I know about the trust, about the offshore accounts, about how you really built your fortune. I deleted the message without hesitation, not because I was afraid, but because I knew exactly what he was trying to do. And I knew how this would end. 2 days later, Claire came home, pale. Victor filed for divorce, she said. I nodded. I assumed he would. He's asking for half of everything, she continued, including assets he claims I'm entitled to through inheritance. I leaned back in my chair. He's counting on money that isn't his, I said. She looked at me sharply. What does that mean? It means, I replied calmly, that the will you think you know no longer exists. She swallowed. That night, I called my lawyer. It's time, I said. The conference room was cold, intentionally so. Victor sat at one end of the table, flanked by his attorney. Claire sat beside me, shoulders squared, hands steady. She wore no jewelry, no makeup, just herself. My lawyer slid a folder across the table. Victor smirked. Finally. Before we begin, my lawyer said evenly, there are a few clarifications. Victor waved him off. Let's not waste time. Eleanor's estate is no longer designated to my daughter, I said calmly. Claire inhaled sharply. Victor froze. What? He demanded. I changed my will. I continued. Months ago. His attorney frowned. Mrs. Whitman, that significantly alters. I am aware, I said. That is why you are here. Victor turned to Claire, eyes blazing. You knew about this? She shook her head. I didn't. He laughed, sharp and ugly. Of course you didn't. She's punishing you, too. I leaned forward. No, I said. I'm protecting her. My lawyer opened the folder. The Whitman estate has been placed into a charitable trust, he explained. Its primary beneficiaries are organizations supporting displaced women over 50, legal aid for elder financial abuse, and educational grants for first-generation students. Victor stared at the documents. And Claire? He demanded. She will receive a stipend, my lawyer said, conditional on her continued independence from marital claims. Victor slammed his hand on the table. You're cutting her off. I'm cutting you out, I corrected. Claire finally spoke. I don't want your money, she said quietly. I want my life back. Victor turned on her. After everything I gave you, she met his gaze. You didn't give, she said. You curated. Silence fell. Victor stood abruptly. You think this makes you righteous? He spat at me. You think people won't dig? I smiled faintly. They already have, I said. And they found nothing. His attorney whispered urgently in his ear. Victor's confidence cracked. The meeting ended without agreement. As we stood to leave, Victor leaned close to me. This isn't over, he hissed. I looked him in the eye. It never is, I replied. Until it is. Outside, Claire exhaled deeply, like someone surfacing after years underwater. I'm scared, she admitted. I took her hand. So was I said. And then I learned that fear doesn't mean stop. It means pay attention. As we walked away, my phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number, I answered. Ms. Whitman, a woman said. My name is Margaret Hale. I believe we share an interest in Victor Langford. I stopped walking. Yes, I said slowly. I believe we do. Behind me, Claire looked up, sensing the shift. The past wasn't finished with us yet, and the next truth was about to be far more public. Margaret Hale's voice was steady, practiced. The kind of calm that comes from someone who has already survived the worst. I don't want money, she said. I want the truth to stop hiding. We met 2 days later in a quiet diner outside the city, the kind of place Victor would never be seen in. Vinyl booths, refills instead of wine lists. Margaret was 68. Sharp eyes, perfect posture. She wore a plain gray coat and carried a leather folder held together with an elastic band that had been stretched too many times. He married my daughter, she said without preamble. Or rather, he almost did. Claire stiffened beside me. They were engaged 3 years ago, Margaret continued. He left 6 weeks before the wedding. Told her she wasn't suitable for the trajectory he envisioned. Trajectory. I felt Claire inhale sharply. He said she lacked polish, Margaret went on. That her family background would limit his advancement. That love was important, but image was essential. Claire looked down at her hands. He did the same thing to me, she whispered. Just slower. Margaret nodded. Yes. He refined his methods. She opened the folder. Inside were emails, messages, financial records. He borrowed money from my daughter, Margaret said calmly. Large sums. Promised repayment once his career stabilized. He never paid her back. I scanned the documents. Dates overlapped. Patterns emerged. This wasn't an accident, I said quietly. No, Margaret replied. It was strategy. She leaned forward. And you weren't his first target, she added. Just the one with the most to lose. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. I heard her pacing the hallway, the floorboards creaking softly. I feel stupid, she said finally, sitting across from me on the couch. Like I should have known. You knew, I corrected gently. You just weren't ready to accept it. She wiped her eyes. He made me feel chosen, elevated. And then, I asked. And then I spent years proving I deserved to be there. I took her hand. That wasn't love, I said. That was conditioning. The next morning, Margaret sent the files to my lawyer. 2 days later, Victor's attorney called. His tone had changed. Victor wanted to settle. The word alone told me everything. He proposed a private agreement. No court, no press. Mutual silence. I declined. You don't understand, his attorney insisted. This could become very public. Yes, I replied. That's the point. The article broke on a Thursday morning. Not gossip, not scandal. An investigative piece, a pattern of manipulation, financial exploitation, emotional coercion, multiple women, multiple families. Victor's name was not in the headline, but it was everywhere else. Claire read it twice, slowly. They believed us, she said softly. They believed the evidence, I corrected. The fallout was swift. Victor's remaining clients dropped him. Invitations disappeared. His carefully curated world collapsed inward. He showed up at my door that night, disheveled, unrecognizable. You destroyed me, he said hoarsely. I studied him. Truly studied him. No, I said. You built yourself on other people's backs. I simply stepped aside. Claire stood beside me. You don't get to speak to her like that, she said. He laughed weakly. You think she did this for you? Claire didn't flinch. She did this because it was right, she replied. I stayed because I was afraid. He looked between us, something like panic flickering in his eyes. You'll regret this, he muttered. I smiled faintly. I regret many things, I said, but not this. He left. And for the first time, I felt something settle. Not victory, peace. 6 months later, Claire signed the lease on her own apartment. Nothing extravagant, light-filled. Hers. She found work at a nonprofit Margaret had introduced her to. Advocacy, education, purpose. One evening, as we sat together cooking dinner, she looked at me and said, I didn't lose a marriage. I lost a lie. I nodded. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, there was quiet. The kind earned the hard way. If you've ever been made to feel smaller so someone else could feel powerful, know this. Truth doesn't rush. But it always arrives. And when it does, it changes everything. If this story spoke to you, take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. Your voice matters here. I thought the story had ended. That was my mistake. The letter arrived on a rainy Tuesday, slipped under my apartment door like a quiet accusation. No return address, just my name, written in a familiar hand I hadn't seen in decades. Eleanor. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The photograph stopped my breath. It was old, yellowed at the edges. A younger version of me stood beside a man I had not seen since the night I buried my husband. We were laughing, careless, alive. On the back, written in ink that had slightly bled with time, were 4 words. You never told her. The letter was brief. Eleanor, Victor is not the first man to mistake silence for weakness. But you taught him that silence once. If you want the truth to end with him, you must finally tell her everything. Ruth. Ruth, my sister. The one who disappeared after my husband died. The one Claire had only vague memories of. The one I never spoke about because the truth felt too heavy, too late. That night, I sat across from Claire at the same kitchen table where we had rebuilt our relationship, piece by piece. There's something I need to tell you, I said. She looked up immediately. About Victor? No, I replied. About me. She waited. No impatience, no judgment. I told her about my marriage, about how, before Victor, before the gallery, before the money, I had once been invisible in a different way. How my husband had controlled the finances, dismissed my ideas, laughed when I suggested starting a business. I told her how Ruth had helped me secretly save money, how she encouraged me to take night classes, how, after he died, Ruth begged me to leave town and start over with her. And I didn't, I said quietly. I stayed. I chose familiarity over courage. Claire frowned. Why didn't you ever tell me this? Because I didn't want you to see me as someone who failed, I admitted. I wanted you to see strength. Claire reached for my hand. Mom, she said, you survived. That is strength. The next day, I called Ruth. Her voice cracked when she heard mine. I wondered if you'd ever be ready, she said. I am now, I replied. We met a week later. 2 sisters with gray hair and unfinished sentences. We talked for hours about mistakes, about silence, about the cost of waiting too long. When Claire joined us for dinner, I watched her listen, really listen. 3 women, 3 generations, 1 truth, finally spoken. That night, I slept without dreams. 1 year after Belmont Row, I stood in the gallery again. Same building, different woman. The exhibit that night was dedicated to late bloomers, artists who found their voice after 50, sculptors who began at 60, painters who refused to disappear quietly. Claire stood beside me, confident but unadorned. Ruth stood on my other side, smiling softly. A woman approached me near the end of the evening. "I heard your story," she said. "About your family. About the trust." I nodded. She hesitated. "I cut my son out of my will last month. People say I'm cruel." I met her eyes. "Are you?" I asked. She shook her head slowly. "No. I'm finally honest." "Then you're doing just fine," I said. Later that night, as the lights dimmed and the guests left, Claire turned to me. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Everything that happened?" I thought carefully. "I regret the years I stayed silent," I said. "Not the moment I spoke." She smiled. Outside, the city glowed. Not brighter, just clearer. Victor never returned. I heard he moved cities, started over. I wished him no harm. I wished him accountability. Claire built a life that didn't require shrinking. Ruth and I speak every Sunday now, sometimes about the past, mostly about what still lies ahead. And me? I am no longer waiting. If you are listening to this and you recognize yourself in any part of my story, hear this clearly. You are not too old to change the ending. You are not cruel for setting boundaries. You are not weak for choosing peace over permission. Sometimes the greatest inheritance you leave behind is not money. It is the truth. If this story moved you, if it made you feel seen, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Your voice matters. Your story matters. And it is never too late to reclaim it.